guess we're going to be having a full house today. A lot of people joining in even now. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and start now. So a very good evening, everybody. I am Pradeep Natrajan, Secretary and Director Outreach of ICF Pune Charter Chapter, and I welcome here today to this beautiful webinar on coaching middle managers by Bimal Rath. Before we start the session, may I request everybody to mute their sound, put on their cameras, and if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the chat window and we'll have it addressed. So today we have with us Bimal Rath. Bimal Rath is an executive coach. His current work is focused on helping leaders and senior teams best leverage their potential. He currently consults and coaches across industries as wide as IT, ITES, financial services, consumer durables, high technology, manufacturing, chemical, banking, telecom, automobile, and engineering. He's the founder and managing director of Think Talent Services, a boutique firm specializing in leadership and talent development. He is the chairman of Brahman Net Solutions, a company specializing in localization and e-learning solutions with its headquarters in Ireland. Prior to running Think Talent, Bimal had over 2 decades of rich experience across different industries, across geographies, including the US, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. His latest corporate position was as HR Director for Nokia Asia Pacific. He had previously held senior positions in Eicher, Cadence, British Telecom, and the Tata Group. His interests in history, cultures, and travel help him to bring a range of experiences and learning into both his life and work. He has written 2 books, both focused on people development and coaching. On behalf of everybody here, I welcome you, Bimal, today to this webinar.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you for the kind words.
We also have with us Latha Gupta, who is the Director Programs of ICF Pune Charter Chapter. Latha, as many of you know, is the founder of OD Mantra, a boutique coaching and mindful leadership development company. She comes with nearly 3 decades of experience in leadership development and has held several executive and board positions with MNC in India. She's a PCC level coach and a team coaching practitioner. Latha serves as the director programs. She's also a yoga and meditation teacher trainer credentialed with International Yoga Alliance as a continuing education provider. She also volunteers and serves as director for non-profits such as Ananda Yoga, an international chain of yoga schools based out of California, and is also on the board of Enabling Leadership, an international NGO that promotes leadership development through Lego, music, and football for children from marginalized sections of society. Warm welcome for you, Latha, and I hand it over to you to start on with the session.
Namaste, everyone. And thank you, Pradeep, for that generous introduction. And really excited, Bimal, to have you with us. We've been following your work for a while. And it's an moment of great enthusiasm and curiosity for us to learn from your experience. And our topic today is coaching middle managers. So we know this, that as coaches, a lot of discussion happens around executive coaching, but maybe not so much about this segment, which is in between. We also focus on frontline leaders. But if we look at the fate of the middle manager, for want of a better word these days, they're under tremendous pressure. As the organization is going through disruption at several levels, there's a lot of pressure on them from the top to perform and adopt and adapt very quickly to the expectations. And at the same time, they have a very young bunch of talent, very agile, quick learning talent, which is also adding to some pressure from below. So if you see, it's like a candle burning from both ends. And that's a very fertile place for us coaches to do some meaningful work. And so we have Bimal here today, who's going to share some tips and maybe some tricks, if he's in a good mood too, on how can we work impactfully with this segment. So in his work and the book, if some of you have read it, The Middle Muddle, he defines the middle manager as someone with between 12 to 22 years of experience. So that's quite a broad spectrum there. And he says CXO minus 1, 2, and with the exception of the frontline leader. So that's the scope of audiences or coaches that we're talking about today. Our session today is about an hour and 15 minutes. If you have questions, might extend till 5:30, but we have a hard stop at 5:30. I invite you to keep questions coming in. And with that, I would invite Bimal, if you could share with us, how did you start your coaching journey? Who was your first coachee, and where did you start? And what would you like to share with us about your journey today?
So, Latha, firstly, thank you to the Pune chapter and you for inviting me among fellow practitioners to, share my views and hopefully learn from some of the views and questions which come up as well. And I think to answer your question, I guess if I go back to my professional coaching, when I started sort of paid coaching, if I may call it that, which was I think in 2010, when I entered into running my own company, Think Talent. I think actually interestingly, my first coach was actually a CEO of a very small company. Okay, and when I say small company, about 250 crores in Indian rupees, and about 500 odd people, manufacturing, high tech manufacturing, but manufacturing at that. And that was my first client. Came in through a reference, but I must say that that was also because while working at the Tatas, in the early 2000s, I had developed a interest for coaching, and while I was not doing professional coaching in a paid way, but within the Tata group I had started doing a fair amount of work, and then subsequently in my later stint at Nokia I had started doing some work across multiple countries. So this coaching assignment, actually the first one, came in through a referral from one of those coaches saying, Bimal's not doing his own stuff, you may want to sort of hire him, kind of a thing. So I was lucky in that sense, if you really want to know, which is how it worked out for the first one.
Thank you, Bimal. And word of mouth is always a good way to get started. So we'll also like to know our audiences a little bit more on where you are on the coaching spectrum. So Pradeep, if you could launch our first poll, and that way we could get to know you all a bit better and then jump into the topic.
Sure,
So
Latha. Just
thank
a
you,
moment.
Pradeep. Yeah.
Here we go. So are everybody able to view the poll?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Pradeep.
Great. So I guess we have more than 90% of the participants who have responded. We'll just give a few more seconds for the others. Okay, so I think the figures have stopped dancing now and we can end the poll. Yes, And here are the results.
Okay, so that's quite a mixed group here. And I'm curious, none of the above. Which segment is that? If anyone wanted to unmute and speak or add in the chat window. Otherwise, it's quite a bunch. So a lot of you working with young audiences from a coaching perspective, and there's quite a bunch of executive coaches and CXO coaches as well as a lot of middle level coaches. Right. Thank you so much. And keeping that in mind, so, Bimal, I would ask you, so this middle model is quite a burning platform, right? And how would you then guide us coaches on what are some of your experiences and wisdom that you've gathered in your deep work with middle managers over the years? I noticed in your book, there are studies conducted over very large population, one particular one over 2,000 people, it said. And so we'd love to hear from you. And of course, this audience is very focused on the ICF framework and the credentialing and competencies. But now in an Indian context, what could you share with us today?
Right. So I think, you'll if you read the book, you'll find a few sort of findings from that research, as you say, over a period of about 10, 11 years. But I think there are two things which I would certainly like to point out, which are very peculiar to this set of sort of cohort of the middle managers, if you will, in a very specific way, right? So one, most of them have been reasonably successful in the sense that they've sort of come to a level where they're saying, okay, I think I have a shot at moving further up in the organization. But the level of surety with which they can say that is actually generally very poor internally, and I'm using the word poor very deliberately. So while outward they will be very confident and they'll possibly come across saying, yeah, I think I've done well till now, but I think I can. But most of them have a lot of questions inside, and questions can range from how do I navigate the organization to I'm not good at politics, will I really go ahead from here, to competence related issues and so on and so forth. And I think one particular aspect I just want to point out is that the level of confidence of many, and I'm speaking very much of the Indian context very specifically right now, because that's what the research really is. The level of confidence of middle managers is actually something which coaches can actually work with quite a lot at this level. Okay, so even if you apparently see if I may call it a little bit of a bravado, internally there are lots of issues which they are actually struggling with, and the range of issues, right? So that's one. I think the other thing is that for a lot of the middle managers who I have worked with, or even in the research, and because my research is primarily from companies which are reasonably successful MNCs or Indian companies and reasonably mid to large size companies, I guess in that cohort you will generally find people with reasonably good educational backgrounds and degrees and so on and so forth. Uh, their ability to ask for help is actually, or even acknowledge that they need help, is not particularly great. Okay, it's starting to change with the younger generation a little bit, I think. That's my reading, at least. So I think if you take these two things, that one, there are lots of internal issues, even though they may be a outward veneer of saying, yeah, I'm good and I know it all, and I can progress. And the second one, where they are almost incapable or unwilling to ask for help, I think those two actually make a very damaging cocktail, if you will. And that's, I think, the first 2 points I'd like to sort of make to your question, Latha.
Thank you, Bimal. Yeah, so those are some things that are going to stay with us. The bravado that you see and the hesitance to ask for help and the dangerous cocktail of these two. So now, I'm also conscious of the fact that this is a very broad spectrum of people, Bimal. So there could be early middle managers, there could be middle managers, and there could be, middle managers really kicking at their bosses for really making it to the top. What could be some nuances of coaching each of these segments? If you could delve a bit deeper into that part of it.
No, I think that's a great question. So, if you take that as a segmentation, saying that early middle managers and the middle managers and the slightly more senior managers who are sort of ready for CXO roles in some form or the other, and starting to hit that ceiling, if you will. Let me take them one by one, right? So the early middle managers, I think, are characterized by a lot of enthusiasm. uh, there is also a long road to go for them, so they see that they can, they have the time, and they have the energy and the enthusiasm. Okay, and that's the characteristic which, one can leverage on, irrespective of the capability. Some of them are actually better than more senior people in many different capabilities, but certainly that is the other end of the spectrum, which is, hitting the ceiling of the CXOs. There are more tired managers than enthusiastic managers. Okay, you very often find people who are struggling, saying, I've reached here, I'm 45, I'm 44. Now, they're almost starting to lose steam, if you will, if I were to be, this thing, and they're trying to struggle really to find out, whether they can, uh, in a way, uh, make it, or should they sort of almost get out of the rat race kind of thing. And they will always have a lot of philosophical conversations with you, saying, I always thought that I should be doing something else, maybe this is not for me, and all that sort of stuff, right? The middle ones, I think, are actually the ones where coaches, I personally believe that coaches can really help them in starting to make some real hard choices around, you know what is the road you want to take from here on. So think about a guy who's sort of, 36. She or he is sort of, has 13, 14, 15 years of experience in, whatever profession they are in or whatever they're doing. And now they still have another 20, 25 years to go, at least, if not more, right? And I think that middle segment is where I believe that they are not reflecting enough. And again, I talk about this in the book, that they are in a stage where I think reflection can be a very, very powerful tool for them. But the middle, that middle piece is characterized by a lower level of reflection than, the slightly more senior ones who are a little tired but are starting to ask some hard questions to themselves. And the lower ones, who are enthusiastic, perhaps that much reflection on required, and they need to focus on other things, more skills, more capabilities, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure whether that answers, Lata, fully your question, but these are some of the characteristics to take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely, Bimal. I think it gives us at least a clear picture of the enthusiasm and energy levels across these three spectrums. And the top, you have people who are kind of exhausted with the race and saying, okay, maybe this is time for me to say goodbye and do something else in life. And I think that got more accentuated in the pandemic, the great resignation and the great rethinking that people are doing, and many are seeking meaning and purpose. What I'm sensing is also a tinge of there could be a sense of exhaustion also, which is driving that and saying, it's hard to stay here, and probably also a very potent space for coaching. And where you can really help them discover a path and way forward, which then fuels inspiration and
Yeah.
the
So
energy to
sorry,
move.
Tata, if I can just stop you there, the reason
Yes.
I said that, maybe the middle is a better place to sort of start off the coaching process, because by the time they've got to that, there is also a tinge of remorse and cynicism which starts setting in.
Hmm.
And sometimes that can be a difficult space for a coach, and also for the individual. So
Mhm.
you know, I would advocate, given, my experience, at least in a limited sort of a way,
Hmm.
is that maybe starting at a 35 to 37 age group is a better deal than starting at a 42 to 45 age group.
Hmm.
That's at least my take personally.
Hmm.
Although it's a very generalistic way of looking at it, and I'm sure each individual and each cohort is different. But I just
Hmm.
wanted to make sure that, that tinge of remorse and the tinge of cynicism which starts setting in,
Hmm.
irrespective of the age, is
Hmm.
something which needs to be watched out for.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of agree with you there, Bimal. And what I've also seen is a lot of times that segment that I was referring to is where remedial coaching kind of things start to happen,
Mhm.
right? In terms of, okay, this guy is getting too too cynical, or, this lady is kind of wanting to get comfortable with her hours, kind of conversations start to happen. What's been your view there in terms of remedial coaching, where the sponsor is more aggressive and looking at it than the coachee themselves? Um,
I,
Anything you can share there?
you know, I am a believer that if the company, and and I'm saying, because I do most of my work in corporate organizations and not outside that. At least 99% of my work is inside corporate organizations. Corporate organizations sometimes use either remedial coaching or even correction, if I may use that word, to as almost like a last resort and firing it on the shoulders of the coach. Okay. Personally, I'm not a great fan of it. I think trying to do it as a last resort is not a great thing from a organizational management and leadership point of view. Even when I was on the other side of the table, that is not something which I would advocate. Having said that, okay, if the person is the individual who's going to get coached, is relatively more self-aware and is a willing participant rather than, at least Lata, the way you put it, which is that the company is putting in the, or the organization is, or the sponsor is putting in the pressure. I would i would actually then work at it, saying that, okay, this person is at a stage where they are almost, quote unquote, either desperate or completely bought into the process that I need remedial coaching. Otherwise, if it is a purely you know, sponsor pushed process, I would be very, very uncomfortable, and maybe, and there have been times personally where I have said no or walked out, actually, to be honest.
So that brings me to another thing I came across in your book, Bimal, where you said um, there's no one who's not coachable. Yeah, everybody is coachable as long as they find the right coach. Yeah. A lot of times we tend to look at coachability index and are they really making it on the line? But you're saying you have to find the right coach. Tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah. So let me put it this way. There's a definition to coaching which I think professional coaches tend to give. Okay, but people find, and I follow, for example, the Carl Rogers philosophy very closely, which is actually that help the person help themselves. Okay, uh, and the reason I say that, everybody can find a coach and everybody is coachable is because sometimes you don't need like 6 sessions or 8 sessions or a structured methodology. Sometimes it is actually just a good feedback conversation with your manager which can turn a person around, because the manager is actually playing that coach role in an outstanding fashion. Okay, it could be a question here and there which could actually convert the person completely. Okay, and somebody who you would otherwise traditionally feel is not coachable. Also, I think, at least some of the people, I have met in my life who are coaches, they have an uncanny ability of showing the mirror to the person, which and that mirror works for that particular person. you know it you know I may not sometimes have that capability of doing that with everybody, for example, or everybody may not. But there are coaches whose ability to show the mirror to the person is so, and if you have that kind of an ability where you are able to show such a clear mirror to the person that the person says, oh, this is what I need to really work on, or this is what I should be doing, then I think there is a possibility. And I think, uh, my own view is that it's like a bit of a, how do you put it, it's like finding the right chemistry or fit sometimes. uh, the worst. So I'll give you an example, okay, maybe to illustrate a point that's better, rather than giving a theoretical thing, right? So one of the companies we worked in, one of my colleagues who was working with this gentleman who had 3 coaches, and each coach he had actually rejected after 2 sessions, saying, I can't work with this coach. And when we entered, and my colleague started coaching this person, the CEO and the HR had actually told us this, saying, this person is, I think, uncoachable, but this is like the last try, because the board has said, you have to give it one more try after the third, after you had rejected the third coach. And the fourth coach, which was one of the think talent coaches, went in, and I'm told, I was not there, but I'm told that they had a huge shouting match. Okay, in the first session there was like a huge shouting match, because the coach actually told him that you've rejected 3 coaches and you think that you know everything and this and that and all that. It was like showing this person, and this person walked out of the room and said, I don't think you can be my coach. And 3 days later he came back, actually contacted the coach directly, apologized, and said that, I think now I realize why I could not work with the first three coaches, because they would have been, equally good. So I think the point I'm just making, Lata, is that many coaches shy away from things which can actually be very good for people. And therefore, it's almost like an excuse that this person is not coachable, but it's because they are uncomfortable with applying certain tips and tricks which may actually work with that person. Okay. So let me just stop there for a minute. Yeah.
Thank you, Bimal. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is be able to hold the right kind of mirror to your coachee is an important skill. And sometimes we have to drop all the frameworks and really dance in the moment and see what needs to happen for that person, albeit sometimes being difficult with them. That's interesting. One another thing, and Pradeep, maybe we can pull up a poll here since we're talking about the challenges in coaching. And as you do that, Pradeep, one more question for you, Bimal, which is in your book, you talk about the Indian manager and his or her elastic deadlines. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Actually, in the book, I've talked about the fact what are the preferences and roadblocks for the Indian manager typically, and there are several things, in that. For example, capability to give and receive feedback, pussyfooting around feedback and not being direct about feedback, and so on and so forth. And one of the things I've talked about is the elasticity of deadlines and so on and so forth. I think, as a country, we have a very oriental notion of time, a very philosophical approach that what is time actually, it is just something which goes on and flows, and, we can flow with it and so on and so forth, and I think what most people, managers and leaders, I think we are getting better at it as a nation, by the way, let me tell you, at least in professional companies, I do see we're getting better at it. But in general, what people, I think, struggle with is that their ability to think that if I don't stick to a particular timeline or a deadline, what does it mean to the subsequent steps in whatever is to happen? Okay. So the ability to actually visualize, a bigger picture actually plays a very critical role in those flexible time zones or stretchable time zones or whatever it is. Okay. Actually, I want to actually, it's interesting you raise this, because let me see if I have, I just picked up a picture from somewhere for some other discussion, and maybe later in the this thing, if you can give me access, I would actually certainly like to show you a particular picture maybe at the end of the session.
Yeah,
uh,
we could do that.
yeah, I picked up something around how Indian managers plan, and I'll try and show that to you at some stage. Yeah. So, but we can go ahead with the poll.
Thanks for that, Bimal. So over to you, Pradeep. You can have the poll now.
Okay, here we go. Waiting for a few more to pull in.
It's interesting how the relationship with seniors is leading.
Okay, I guess I will end the poll now in the next 10 seconds. There we go. And here are the results.
What do you say to that, Bimal?
Mm. So my own, my own view is that this is very typical of the Indian hierarchical way of thinking. Okay, and I think the thing which I think most people in many ways are not perhaps taking into account that uh, the word to the manager or the word to the leader actually reaches through your peers and through your subordinates much more than directly. And I would actually as we coach managers in the middle, this is actually one of the problems, that while they are very very focused on building, or let's say aligning with their superior, they don't do enough with their peers and subordinates. And therefore, as you grow into leadership positions, for example, your ability to inspire subordinates, for example, to work in matrix organization with peers, work in cross cultural environments where your peers are, as as capable and as influential in the system as you, and so on and so forth. I think some of those are capabilities which a lot of middle managers lack. It's also the nature of our performance management systems and organizations where the focus is very much on this thing. So what happens is that if you compare more evolved organizations, and also compare more Western organizations, which is where I've worked in some large multinationals, some of those skills actually people build quite early, which is how do you influence peers? How do you work with subordinates where subordinates are willing to put in discretionary effort, and so on and so forth. And I think those are skills a lot of middle managers in our case actually um, don't build early enough, and they therefore remain, while they may be a middle manager, but they operate much more like a quote unquote first line manager or even an individual contributor very often. Yeah. So that's my response to the poll and those issues, Lata, which came up.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of times, they're so focused on managing the boss, but if you don't manage equally well downwards and sideways, that can be quite a recipe for disaster. And more so in this new kind of matrix structures that are coming up. And it's something to really focus more on. And I've seen many of my coaches benefit the moment you talk about it. How are you building allies? And they're like,
Mm.
okay, maybe I can give more attention to that space.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so thank
Sorry,
you,
Lata,
coaches. Yeah,
Lata, if you can just give me a second, let me see. I think I found the one slide
yeah,
I want to show and just close off that
yeah. Let's do that.
discussion. I'm just sharing. So I hope you'll be able to see the.
Yes, we can see. Uh, yeah, we do.
So now you understand what I was talking about, and the question you asked, right? So yeah. So let me leave it at that and not say anything more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because
the.
our sense of space and time is very oriental, if you will. Okay. And we tend to be very, uh, let's say we are in our own world around time and space. Let me just say that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Love the spacing. So now thanks for that. And we wanted to make sure that you also have a little bit of a taste of the real lived-in experience of middle managers. And we've had two of our coaches, senior coaches, who volunteered to do a little role play for you. And a bit of a spoiler warning, this is a small excerpt from Bimal's book. Yeah, but there is a whole lot there. But this is a small piece, and it gives you a sense of how he brings to life how things play out in the workplace. So this is a conversation between a leader and a middle manager. And we have Dr. Supriya Donge, our coach from Pune, and she comes with a doctorate in psychology. So I'm going to see all of those emotions also play out there. And how can she give a tough time to our coach from Bangalore, Johnny Joseph, who many of you know. He's been a regular at many of our events, a senior coach, works on executive and life coaching. And he, by the way, I heard he's also a professional role player. So let's watch this. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Latha.
Hi, Supriya.
Hello, Johnny. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to this conversation with you.
What's this about?
This is about my career growth. I want to grow my career.
Okay. And what do you mean by growing your career? I mean,
Yeah, so obviously, when I say career growth, I want to have better designation, more work responsibilities, and better money also.
okay. Did this happen to you this morning when you woke up that you decided to grow your career? Or what happened suddenly that you want to have this conversation with me?
No, this was there in my mind because I'm quite sure of my potential.
Mhm.
And I'm doing what all is being asked. And
Okay.
I sit late in office, and my rating is also 4. So
Right.
I'm quite qualified also.
Okay. So sitting quite late and your grade of what you have done in the past, you're saying that you are quite sure of your potential. How is that connecting?
Yeah, so if you will give me the opportunity, I'm sure I'll do the justice.
And on what basis do you think I can give you that opportunity, Supriya?
I'm here for so long, and as I said, that I'm quite compliant to the work I'm being asked to deliver, and I have analyzing my potential, that I have that in me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you say you've used the word potential a couple of times in this conversation, and you just said that you have analyzed your potential, and that's something that I am struggling with our HR team to be able to identify potential. How did you do that, Supriya?
So I will come to HR about it later, Johnny, because I also have to say something about it. But when it
Uh,
comes to potential, the competencies I demonstrate on my role, what is expected, the deliverables, and so that's what is being demonstrated by me.
so what you're saying is that what you've delivered is equal to your potential.
Yeah, so if I'll get better opportunity or the more responsibility, I'll deliver there also.
And what's the evidence for that?
So you are like my manager, so you know that a lot of evidence is
I know
there.
you are a good performer. You're part of our team, which is performing and made us achieve the goals. Okay. And you are one among the 10 top performers in the organization. And all of you happen to be part of my team. And how does that make me feel that you are ready for the next role?
So
I'm not
I
denying the fact that you got a 4 in your appraisal and you've done a great job in the past. But whenever you keep saying that, I've got the potential, I've analyzed it, I would like to know, Supriya, what is it? What's the method that you've adopted? Because I'm trying to crack this myself.
Yeah, because to be honest about HR, we don't have a system in place to actually develop our strength.
Okay.
And we are so overloaded with our work that we are hardly left with any time to analyze ourselves. But this is my feeling. This is like I feel that I'm capable of handling large portfolio or the next
Right.
position.
Supriya, I'm sure you will understand that we cannot move to higher roles a person based on feelings. I think you will understand when I say that we've reached a stage and time in our, um, you know, um, career and also the time that we are operating in the global market. It is all evidence based. What you've done yesterday, you've been rewarded for yesterday. That's not a guarantee or a passport for your tomorrow. How do I make sure? What will you do to demonstrate your ability that I will have confidence that you will perform in the next role?
So that I like I would like to know that, because I want to grow in my career and I know that I have a potential.
Yeah. So we've had this selection for the last promotion, and you were considered for that along with others. And you know that the best person wins, right? It's not about what you've done in the past. It's about what you can do in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll wait for some more time to have more detailed discussion around it. That what I have to do in present to get that kind of a thing which I can deliver in future.
Maybe I think we can see if you can work with a coach and see if you can oof, look at some of these and then see which are those areas which you can literally analyze and see if you're ready for the
Yeah. So
future.
I would advocate check with Bimal Rath. He actually coaches middle
Oh, right.
managers.
Okay.
Oh,
Then I would see if I can get Bimal to coach you and see
sure,
what.
sure. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Over to you, Latha.
Thank you so much, Johnny and Supriya. That was improv on the spot. And Bimal, there you go with more word of mouth. But I'll leave this with you, Bimal, to really open up for a conversation with the audiences.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think
on this
the
brilliant role play.
no, and I think this is not a very untypical conversation. You would read a few in the book, etc. But this is not a very untypical conversation. The only perhaps thing I would perhaps you know articulate it that and this is, Johnny, not a comment on your style or anything, but I just wanted to say that typically these conversations we tend to use a lot of words like we, our, the company, the system, and so on and so forth. And sometimes, a lot of times, in particularly in middle manager coaching, my own experience is that it may be more worthwhile being a little more direct with the person, in the sense that uh, I think, most people are sensible in the sense that if you say, okay, this is what I believe, this is where I think you lack, rather than taking a more broad based, language which can tend to be misunderstood. Okay. I have found that while the tonality should be soft and respectful, but directness and frankness possibly is something which the 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 more modern managers expect more of. They don't like you to use language which sort of, let's say, pussyfoots around a little bit, is one of the things. And that is one of my learnings, because I grew up in an environment, and many of us, I think, have grown up with companies and environments where uh, taking on somebody directly and giving them a very harshest feedback and confrontation is not often seen as a great thing. But I'm finding that a lot of younger leaders and managers are now saying, okay, tell me as it is, kind of a thing. And that's a skill I think coaches have to develop in that sense. So that's one. The other is, and Supriya, you did a great job of it, I must say. Most people come into conversations with a lack of preparation. Okay. And many people would have actually seen this, so all of you know this Japanese saying, I think, which says that if I had 8 hours to cut a tree, I would sharpen my axe for 7 hours, right? And I one of the things I work with a lot of, I would not even say mid-level leaders, even senior leaders. How do you actually prepare for a conversation? Okay, that's a very specific skill and capability which many middle managers and even senior managers lack. People land up in conversations and meetings, absolutely haven't thought through what they will say, how they will say it, what words will they use or not use. If a particular set of questions come up, how will they deal with it? So and again, Lata, that goes back to the earlier question you were asking in a different way. Like we are flexible with time and space, we are also very flexible with our whole approach to meetings and conversations, saying, yeah, we'll land up there and then we'll see what happens, kind of a thing. Yeah. So I think from this thing, one of the things I would certainly encourage uh, my fellow coaches to sort of pick up is that if you can help people at the middle manager level particularly to learn how to prepare for conversations and meetings, that is an absolutely critical skill, which can lead them into into a much better zone, so to say. Yeah. So Lata, that's just a broad brush, couple of comments. You know, but great job done. I see that
Yeah.
they both of them have careers as actors, if not as coaches. So
Yeah, and then they can mix the two too beautifully. So, Bimal, this brings me to another theme that you've dedicated a whole chapter to, which is derailers. Yeah. So, would you like to talk a bit more about what are some derailers, and maybe even share an anecdote where you coached one of your coachees on one of their derailers? How did you go about it?
so I think so. Let me say this, and as long as it doesn't get quoted out of context, I think, see, organizations and managers are selfish. Okay, so as people are growing up in their careers, uh, they actually very often very deliberately teach you, or almost take you down a path of wrong skills because they need you at that point of time. And uh, and so what happens is that you keep getting rewards for something which is not going to carry you too far forward. Okay, so let's say that, for example, you are a great guy at doing something very quickly and in a very agile manner. Early in your career, your boss will keep promoting you every 2 years or 2.5 years. So and the boss will keep saying, great job done, great job done. Every 2.5 years you keep getting promoted, and because you are very quick and agile and all that. But you are in your career now for 10 or 12 years, and because you have learned that that is the way to succeed, you have almost lost the muscle of reflection and observation, or observation and reflection, in that order, right? And then when you get stuck at that stage, the company comes back and tells you, but you're not ready, because while you are a great execution person, but you don't have XYZ kind of a thing. So so I have a belief that organizations can be very selfish in that sense. Okay, not necessarily meaning to be selfish, but that's how organizations operate and managers operate. Unless the manager is a very evolved manager or a leader who tells you that, okay, this is your role today, but what you're going to do in the future will require a very different set of roles, a very different set of capabilities, right? So that's one part of Lata, as a base. I wanted to set that up, right? So what that does is that sets up habits and behaviors early in careers of people, which then tend to become derailers. Okay, so you don't start with a derailer. It's actually a great thing you learn, but that over a period of time becomes so deeply embedded that it becomes a derailer. That is one situation. The other situation is that nobody tells you early enough, nobody gives you feedback early enough that this is going to become a derailer, for the simple reason that you do other things very well. Okay, so organizations and managers again take the benefit of that. You are an outstanding analyst, a lousy people person, but because you're an outstanding analyst, the company will keep using those capabilities for a long time. And then when you reach a particular level, company will tell you, but your people skills are not there, so you can't now become a general manager or whatever it is, right? So both these situations occur, and therefore dealers in a way get highlighted at a slightly later stage in the career, than otherwise, right? uh, the view I take, and based on whatever my limited experience is, that one particular derailer can actually subsume all the other good things the person may have. And very often derailers are to do with people skills. Very often, because when you are individual contributor or first line manager, many of those skills don't get enough attention, and therefore they get highlighted only when you are in a role where a very deep sense of capabilities are required on people skills and so on and so forth. And that those derailers show up much more clearly in environments where, and this is important, when you change a job, when you change a role, when you change a manager, suddenly the derailer which your previous environment was willing to live with, the new environment is not willing to live with. And any new manager coming in saying, yeah, you guys said that he's a great guy, but actually he can't do this, or she can't do this, and she's not capable of, for example, doing great planning, even though she's a great XYZ. So I think the challenge with derailers is that they get embedded over a period of time. They may have been part of, somebody's written that they are part of the personality, and or they become part of the personality, which is true. The point I am trying to make is that organizations almost reward or shape those, and if the individual is not careful, they can get they can fall into that trap. Yeah. So Lata, I'll give you one particular anecdote. Okay, so just
Yeah.
to just to illustrate a derailer point, right? So a young woman executive who I was coaching, I think about maybe 4 years back, 2017 or so. I coached her for about a year. Now, her previous managers had actually told her that, you know, you need to stand up like a man, almost. Those were the words used, right? Saying that, you are a woman, so you need to make an extra effort. You need to go out and, drink with your colleagues in the evening, socialize more, network more, all of those stuff. And because she worked with that manager for, I think, about 13 years or 14 years. And unfortunately, she had taken that to heart and worked in building many of those capabilities, skills, which almost became second nature to her. Now, when I started coaching her, her situation was that she had moved into a new job within the same company, but a different department, a different this thing. And the new boss, who was a global person, said, you don't need to all do all this. You don't need to stretch all of this stuff. You are no more a rookie. You have a credibility, and you must have the belief in yourself that you are great, and therefore, just do and choose to be who you are, kind of a thing. And she was having serious trouble with it. Okay, because she just couldn't make out why this feedback was sort of coming to her. And in fact, the first 3 or 4 sessions she had with me, we had an interesting case where she would write it down, saying, this is what I believe, and this is what I've been doing, this has made me very successful. Why should I change, kind of questions. Okay, and she would come back and say, Bimal, I thought about it, and here are my questions, that why should I really change. Okay, this has carried me so far. And and interestingly, by the fifth or the sixth session, with her manager working with her, because she was a global leader herself and me working with her, at least she started realizing the amount of energy. So actually, the whole coaching conversation we had about how are you spending your energy. Okay, because I realized that trying to change her habits would be a difficult one unless she could have a very different language in her head. And then in the fourth session or so, we started conversing about, okay, where do you think, why do you get tired, and what makes you tired. And then she realized that a lot of the stuff she was doing was actually not natural to her, and she was ending up spending a lot of energy. And then there was a path forward, and then she was able to say, okay, how can I use my energy better. But it took us 4 or 5 sessions to actually even move that conversation to how she was losing a lot of energy by not being herself. Okay, I don't know whether that makes sense to any of you, but that's one of the cases, Lata, I thought I would sort of share with this group. Yeah.
Thank you, Bimal. And I must say, I've heard that, yeah, behave like a man, hang around and network with men. We've all grown up with that. So it struck a very particular chord with me. And what I'm gathering from this conversation, Bimal, is derailers, you're saying, are actually areas of strength, which over a period of time, you exercise that muscle so hard that it ends up being something that is a blocker for you. Now, I wanted to flip
Sorry,
the...
sorry, if you can just stop it. I think what I'm, the additional point on that, just to build on what you said, I'm also making is that early in your career, actually the organization and managers almost encourage it. They help you around building derailers, if you will. Okay.
Right.
And that is important to understand if you're coaching
Yeah.
beginners.
Yeah. So absolutely. So you get all the applauses, and then one day you're wondering, where did it all go wrong? Now, I'm going to flip that question, Bimal, and say we're a bunch of coaches here. And I think in your work with Think Talent, you also work with a large number of coaches. Have you seen coaches having derailers? What are some common ones?
You're now putting me in a situation where I may lose a lot of friends, but that's
Yeah, in the interest of the community, we'd love to hear some of the inside
but
stories.
it was very good to see a lot of familiar faces and names on this group. Some of whom I have not met for a very long time. So it was nice to see some of those. But Yeah, to go back to your question, Lata, I think there are three, and I think somebody mentioned one of them in in uh, uh, in uh, in passing in the conversation. I can't find it now in the conversation. So I think a lot of coaches are very afraid of uh, positive confrontation or constructive confrontation. They feel somehow that the relationship may deteriorate, or this thing. So I believe that if you have the right style, and if you are well-meaning, actually the best conversations are with people you really get along with well, and it actually helps you in building the relationship very further. But that's a very, I would say, big derailer I have seen in many Indian coaches, particularly, and I'm using the word Indian and Southeast Asia in a very broad, generic one. Right? So that's a big one. That how do you actually confront and almost deliberately raise conflict? Okay, that's one. The second one I think is that people are uh, unwilling to call out quote unquote weaknesses, and I'm not saying necessarily that you should use the word weaknesses, but a lot of coaches believe that you should only quote unquote hover around the weaknesses and really work with the strengths. My own belief is that if you love the person fully, then you need to love them with all the goods and bads and whats and moles they come with. Okay, you can't love the person's strengths and work with them and not work with the quote unquote weaknesses. And again, and it's a philosophical thing, right? Some people feel that we should work only with the strengths and so on and so forth. But I think that's a big derailer, I think, if you want to be a healthy coach. I think the third one I would say is that uh, a lot of coaches I have still seen are very, well, let me just say, are very tardy themselves, in the sense that they don't necessarily prepare particularly well for coaching meetings. They don't make detailed notes. They come in with whatever they have learned. They don't make enough effort to learn about the person, because coaching is, in my view, about the person and not about the tools and the process. Everything else is just a aid to help you, help the person, so to say, right? So I think there is there's a lot of preparation on the tools and the methodology and the mechanics of it, but perhaps a little more effort on the person side, really deeply preparing around understanding the person, and before each meeting really taking time to reflect about the person. I think, Lata, those are the three. And I know that I'm making very generalistic comments, but I also want to make sure that it is challenging enough and not, I don't want to just make some random comments. So the journalistic comments also I'm making, I have seen it in enough places to be making those comments. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Bimal. That's helpful. And I agree with you. Yeah, we can also get a bit rusted in the whole game if we don't stay alert and keep enriching ourselves with learning and working more diligently around our coaches. So one another, shifting the lens a little bit, and so to the audience, if you have questions, now is the time to post them in the chat box, and we might, if we have time, try and open up also for some of you to ask, but this is the time to get your head around the questions. And in the meanwhile, Bimal, just shifting it to the spectrum of stakeholders and sponsors, right, for coaching middle managers. How can coaches engage better with them in this context of coaching middle managers? Yeah, what are some challenges they come across, and how could they do it better?
Yeah. I think there is, and I'll go to a very specific instrument first and then come back, right? So I think there is a over reliance on the 360 instrument to gather stakeholder feedback very often, by coaches. And I would encourage that even if you have to do a 360, supplement that with a few conversations with stakeholders, as far as the coaching itself is concerned. And I know, Lata, you have a broader question, so I'll come back to that. But I wanted to make this point about the 360 instrument that, in the Indian context, at least my understanding is that unless the organization is fairly mature, the quality of what you get in a 360 and the feedback you get from stakeholders can be fairly, mixed kind of a thing. So I think even if you're using an online instrument, may be useful to also have some other conversation with stakeholder to get more deeper understanding and better quality data, right? So that's as far as the coaching or the coach and coachee process itself is concerned and getting feedback from stakeholders. But the broader set of stakeholders, Latha, to your question, I think uh, many coaches, so let me break that into two parts, right? So many coaches see that the stakeholders who are involved in this, whether they are CEOs or board members or other sponsors, can very often uh, be the people who are deciding and paying their bills. Okay, if I may put it that way, right? So there is a little bit of a hedging around that as to how do you deal with these people without sort of offending any of them, kind of a thing. And that's not always a very good thing, because uh, very often when so and somebody asked this question earlier, right? You asked about correctional coaching. Actually, in correctional coaching, one of the challenges is that the manager or the leader or the CEO may not have done their job, and because they have not done their job, they're coming to the coach to and I remember asking one person saying that you worked with this person for 25 years, you couldn't make this change or help this person make this change, and you expect the coach to do it in 6 months, right? And obviously he was quite offended, and then we had a nice dialogue around it and all that. But I'm just saying that that is one that sometimes, because these stakeholders are quote unquote paying our bills, we tend to pussyfoot around some of these issues. That's one. And I would say that I think that coaches can develop a very good style to still be challenging and without being offensive. Okay. And I'm sure many of you have worked on this yourself and developed this style. And, as you build the relationship, you can do that. So that's one part of it. The other two aspects I wanted to bring out, and in part two, is that uh, stakeholders can be nosy, okay, and they would like to know every single thing which has happened in the conversation, and what did she say about me, and what did she say about the organization. And even though there's a confidentiality agreement, and I will say this, I've been a HR person, so many HR folks are very curious, to the point of being deeply nosy, okay. And I think that's the aspect which the coach needs to be very careful about, that what information are you sharing with stakeholders and how are you sharing it, and you're not breaking your code of conduct as far as confidentiality is concerned, in managing the stakeholders. And the second part of it is that if you want to operate with the full ethics of the coaching profession, my encouragement is that right up front, I think, negotiate and be very clear what is the process going to be or what is the process not going to be, what will the coach be able to share or not be able to share. Very often I think coaches don't do a good job of that contracting right up front. They assume many things, and that then when later in the coaching, let's say the CEO asks, can you give me an assessment of the person, and you say, but this is not part of the deal, and then the stakeholder is unhappy because their expectations and your expectations are not in line. So I think particularly on confidentiality, I want to make sure that at least when I coach, I want to make sure that I am actually negotiating upfront and agreeing what is within the scope or what is not within the scope. Yeah. So I don't know, I'm giving you a bit of a roundabout answer, Latha, but I'm not sure whether it answers your question partially at least.
Absolutely, Bimal. And one of the things that I've practiced, which I found useful, is contract for a kind of a tripod meeting every, quarter or 4 months, where the sponsor, the coachee, and the coach together have a conversation.
Absolutely.
And that becomes a very open format, and you do the influencing that you want to right there. And I'm also noticing some very interesting theories and comments coming up in the chat box on how HR looks at coaches to do some spying. So yeah, Tarun, sometimes you do end up in those spaces. I think, Bimal, you really covered a very wide spectrum on this whole topic of coaching middle managers, and immensely grateful to you for that. And I would take a moment to wave Bimal's book to you all. I hope you can all see it there. Yeah. So highly recommended. The Middle Muddle, helping middle managers navigate careers, and it's available on Flipkart, Amazon, and other places. And it's fairly recent. So I think it's in 2020 that it was published. And he has a number of anecdotes there, which you would find very relevant. And yeah, we would love to hear from you. Maybe even get back on how you found this whole conversation by typing in the chat box. And I'd like to open it up for questions to the audiences. Yeah. Anyone wants to unmute and ask? And I don't know, Pradeep, if there are any questions in the chat box. I didn't come across any so far. Yes, Saurabh, I see you raise your hand there.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Rath. This has been useful. And for the first time, probably I've been taking notes, because there were so many useful things you were saying. So interestingly, you correlated age or rather work experience with the stage of management, like 12 to 22 years of experience and being in the middle management. So I just wanted to wanted you to share your perspective on how this relation is now changing in the startup world, because we see that people with much lower range of experience are not only in middle management, but they're also executives.
Yeah.
So I think this relation between tenure and level of management has got disrupted in recent years.
Yeah.
So what are your observations and any lessons for us?
No, great question, Saurabh. So I think two parts. So one is that, I have taken that age range because most of the work I have done is with the more large traditional organizations and not startups. And that's the space I understand. And that was that, group of 2,000, 3,000 managers we work with. So just to set the context there. But I think coming to the startup world, I think there are two things which I am learning as we go along. One, leaders and managers in the startup world are actually very short of the natural process of growing as a manager and a leader. And you see that in their behaviors. There's enough and more literature out there where, toxic cultures, lack of leadership behavior in many different aspects, particularly of people management and, other aspects as well, is coming through very clearly in the startup world. And, you see that, because I believe personally, and this is what I think, see, you can shorten the journey even of a very, very high potential leader. Maybe he or she can shorten the journey by a few years, but you can't cut short completely the process of gaining experience. Okay. So my answer partly to your question is that I think we should not go by designations. Okay. So I believe that many of the CEOs and even the CXOs in startups are actually more like individual contributors than really middle managers and this thing, even though by designation they may be called whatever, right? So when I coach many of the CEOs also in the startup world, I coach about 2 or 3 of them I've coached 2 or 3 over the last couple of years. I actually treat them as first line, very bright first line individual contributors becoming first time managers. Actually, that's the way I treat them in my mind. Yeah. I don't know whether that answers your question, Saurabh, but that is how I look at it, honestly.
No, thank you. I just needed your perspective, and this is useful, what you just said, and makes a lot of sense that we have to look at the person's growth or developmental stage rather than designation or tenure. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Saurabh. I see another question there from Ashish in the chat box. He says, any specific assessments you recommend for evaluating a middle manager's readiness to move up to top management, Bimal?
Well, I am not a great fan of using a particular assessment. Okay. I think that you should use a battery of assessments firstly. So I would say that, you do a combination of multiple assessments. Typically when, as Think Talent as a company, when we do it, there would be 5 or 6 different assessments. One a personality one around customers, one around people, one around, typically cognitive and analytical ability. So I don't recommend a particular instrument. A lot of companies are very fond of using psychometric instruments, and I think personality psychometric instruments have a lot of value in opening up a conversation. But if you're looking at movement from middle to the top, I would use a battery of instruments rather than one particular instrument. So that's Ashish one, this thing. I also very often use in basket case studies. So where the person is actually put in a simulated situation to actually act out a senior level position. So the in basket will actually be a CEO role based in basket or a next level based in basket, a CXO role based. So the person is actually put in a situation of being a senior executive, let's say for 2 hours, and answer questions and deal with the situation like the next level. So I have found the in basket process a lot more powerful to understand whether the person is thinking at the next level, kind of a thing. Okay, so that's Ashish. I'm not giving you a direct black and white answer, but that's my view.
Yeah, quite some tips there. So next question is from Dr. Supriya, and she says, how different is it to coach senior versus middle managers?
Again, I think, I go back to what I said earlier. So, I would not go by designation, Supriya. I think, I tend to go by what has been this person's past history, what roles this person has actually done, and what are the capabilities with, for example, I was coaching somebody, a French gentleman actually, who had always been a technical architect. And then when, the company sent him to India in a role of a overall center head for a technology company, right? And he had like 300 or 350 people to manage. But all his life, this gentleman had been a technical architect, never actually handled people. So while you would say that he's a senior person, but the kind of issues you were working with this person were not so much emotional maturity or technical capability or whatever, but basic skills around, delegating, planning for a team as against planning for yourself, holding good quality meetings, and so on and so forth. So my way of looking at it, Doc, is that focus very much on the issues of that person rather than how do you put it? Bucket the person as senior or middle or junior. That's, at least in my case, that has helped me quite a bit.
Yeah. And the next question then is coming from Tarun, and he asks you, Bimal, if any observations while you're coaching, if middle managers in general are trained, groomed well to develop future leaders from their team below.
Yeah.
And I see quite a few hands going up as well. So yeah.
I think this is a great question, Tarun. So I think in some organizations, at least we work with, very early in the stage when people are becoming first level or manager of managers, there are a lot of emphasis on how do you build a culture for that organization. And as part of that, I think there are 3 skills which companies tend to focus on. So one is, how do you actually have great performance and feedback conversations? How do you become a great mentor? And thirdly, how do you give feedback? If it is not part of the first 2, in some cases it is part of the first 2, kind of a thing. And those tend to sort of help build that orientation that as I grow, I need to build other leaders. That's one. There are at least 2 or 3 companies I have come across where at the middle manager level, there is a weightage in their performance appraisal around how are you developing next level leaders. Yeah. So there is so they are actually, I think in one of the companies it's 5%, in another company it's, I think, I don't remember now, but about 3 or 4%, where the weightage, so your performance appraisal is actually linked to a couple of these aspects. But the trick, I think, is to, my own view is that the trick is to focus on the skills and some perspective about the fact that you only grow if the people below you grow. Okay. And I think once it sits in people's head that I will grow if my people grow, and the insecurity goes away to some degree, people tend to take this fairly well, because they realize that, if I'm able to grow the next level leaders, my own future becomes brighter. Yeah.
Hope that helps. And Moshmi, would you like to go next? Yeah, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much. So very insightful and a lot of takeaways, I would say, from the discussion. So I have two parts to this particular question and something that I have experienced. So the first is, whenever we started with the coaching, so we were told that, the other person to whom you coach is always, they are whole and complete and they come up with their own solutions. But, and you are supposed to ask powerful questions to make them think and brainstorm. So sometimes what happens is, I see them struggling, and more than coaching per se, tends to be like a prescriptive mode. You prescribe the other person because you may have certain answers. So how to avoid those things? And second question to it is, like, whenever we do, some kind of coaching, some people, the coachee, they always have this doubt as to why they are put into such kind of a coaching, engagement. They feel that it's more like a performance improvement plan for them. And somewhere there is a kind of a imbalance when it happens during the coaching conversation. So I just wanted kind of a help from all of you in order to how do I, have a streamlined approach in this.
Yeah. So let me answer the second one first. Moshmi. So
Sure.
I think communication is the responsibility of the chief stakeholder in a company. If you are talking about a company context as to why the person is being coached, and very often managers and HR don't do a great job, or the sponsor doesn't do a great job. As a coach, I always insist that, and I think Latha was mentioning that, or somebody else was mentioning that, having a three-way meeting upfront in which this issue is discussed as to why the person is being provided a coach, I think very often clarifies at least 90% of the doubt. Even though, and if it is a genuine enough conversation, authentic enough conversation, I think the person then understands why a coach has been appointed. And in some cases, the coach could be for correction, right? So there could be behavioral challenges which the person is facing, if the role change, something else. But it is better to be upfront. And if there is a three-way conversation, I think it helps. So that's one. I think to go back to your other question, the simple answer is, in the context of Southeast Asia and actually most of Asia, coaches, I think, need to use both pull and push. Okay. The Western model of only pull, which is only asking powerful questions, does not always work in Asia, in my experience, right? You need a little bit of push, a little bit of nudge, a little bit of this. And what I mean by push is that sometimes you have to share other examples, share anecdotes, not be prescriptive, but provide nudges for them to think for themselves. Okay. And I think the second part of the answer is that it requires a lot of practice. Like any other skill, as a coach, the more you practice, the more you develop that skill of balancing pull and push, so to say. Yeah, there's no rocket science to it. You just need to develop the both the muscles. Yeah, but I would say that a little bit of push along with the pull goes a long way in our cultural context, certainly.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Shripad, would you like to go next? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Sripad from Pune. One observation I have is a lot of these middle managers in 40s or 30s, they are there on the verge of burnout or boredom. Boredom comes from the fact that, okay, मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? Or burnout, they try to do too much of a thing. So have you seen any of these cases where the burnout sets in and they are either make or break stage, and any specific line of attack or line of help you extended?
So I think answer is that yes, I have seen a lot of these cases where there is boredom, and if you go back to the flow model of Mehali Chikmehai, which some of you may be familiar with or following, generally it happens because the level of challenge is very different to the level of the capability of the person. Okay. So I use the flow model as a basis to then help the person examine, where is the mismatch between their capability and the challenges in the work or, in the environment they are today. And then do they have a plan to balance their capability with the challenge? Okay. And I think as soon as there is a better balance between, the role they are doing, the projects they have, the other things they're doing, people tend to come down to a better state of flow. I would not say that all the boredom goes away or all the apathy goes away, but certainly that is the route I take, where I where I try to help them get a better balance between the capabilities they have and the challenges, which could mean sometimes asking their boss for a new project, getting in, in a practical way, getting in, involved in a project outside their work sometimes, or in an interdepartmental one, taking up studies sometime, taking up a course or something which, actually challenges them and, sort of reinvigorates their mind and heart a little bit. Yeah. So that's the methodology I use, to answer Shripat, that part of the question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see another question there in the chat box. Some organizations want middle managers to act like entrepreneurs. Any thoughts on how to approach such a coaching conversation?
I think there are two language tips I can give you to that. Okay. So one, I often start the conversation by saying, what is the impact you want to create over the next 12 months? Okay. So I start with impact, and then when you start with impact, that can often lead you into conversations around what the person should be doing in terms of taking initiatives, or, in a broad sense, acting like entrepreneurs. But the conversation starts with the impact the person wants to create rather than the activities or whatever. The second I typically start with the role, and then say, okay, if this is your role, how do you think you can continue to expand your role? How do you expand your role so that your influence in the organization goes up and you are able to actually do a much larger role over a period of time, in the context of your current situation, right? So either, so to cut a long answer short, either you start with impact, and that then leads to specific things she or he will do and specific behaviors, or start with a role and then talk about how can you expand the role to create a larger influence in the sphere in which you are operating. Yeah, those are the two techniques I typically use when something like this comes up.
And I'm conscious of time, but we'll take the last couple of questions. So Amitava, I see your hand raised, and then I'll take one from the chat box. Yeah.
Hi, Latha. Thank you so much. Mr. Rath, it was a really learning experience listening to you. And I operate out of Bangalore, but I think ICF Pune has been a huge support. I've attended a lot of their programs. So thanks for that. My question is slightly different from the subject, but it relates to something which Latha said. I faced a situation where, having had a contract made, the CEO wanted a feedback after even the first or second session, right? So I went and talked to myself, and then finally managed to discuss with him that I would only give it after 1 quarter or 4 sessions. So my question is very specific. What's a guideline of ICF, whether be it in principles or the ethics, in terms of feedback allowed to clients? And I say clients as opposed to the coachee. I mean, making a differentiation between the two.
So Latha, maybe you or your colleague should take that question. This is not for me really.
Yeah. So I think this goes into that whole competency of demonstrating ethical practice. And it very clearly says that under no circumstances should the conversation be compromised, no matter how eager or pressurizing the sponsor is. And I think what I'm gathering from this, Amitava, is your sponsor probably also needs to ease off a bit. He or she is expecting results too soon, and I would just show the code of ethics and say this is what I'm bound by. And usually I also put that in my contract up front, so they know where the boundaries are, and that's helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome. And so Tarun's been posting a few questions. So Tarun, I'll take one of them, which is, he says that from that poll, what do you feel can be the main reasons there are bottlenecks for managers in their relationship with seniors?
Yeah, so I think one of the perspectives which, I've been, let's say, trying to learn a little bit more about, and my view is starting to get formed up in that direction, even though not fully formed up, is that uh, generations are changing very quickly. Okay, and so let me explain what I mean, right? So let us say that there's a leader who's worked for 30 years versus somebody who's worked for 20 years. In the earlier days, there will not be too much difference in perspective and the ways of working between the 20-year guy, the 25-year guy, and the 30-year lady. Okay, because 10 years is pretty much a generation. These days, what tends to happen is that the generations are changing every 3 years, right? So if you are, let's say, 5 years old in a work environment, and your manager or the leader is an 8-year-old person, actually they think very differently, and therefore the gap between the leader and the next level tends to become more and more, as compared to the earlier generations, because you know just the transition and the pace of change has accelerated so much that uh, there is a dramatic sort of shift which is happening in that sense, and therefore the quality of the relationship between the leader and the next level is partially impacted. The second aspect is just pure distraction. People's ability to fundamentally be focused on one aspect of things is going down dramatically. And again, that has a very significant uh, you know uh, impact on the quality of relationship, not just with your manager, but actually with everybody around you. Yeah, but those are two very specific things I think my mind is starting to get formed up upon more and more as I see it. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for that, Bimal, and really appreciate you taking time out for us on a weekend and sharing so richly your experiences, and very rich experience over a wide spectrum, and very grateful to you. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Pradeep.
Oh, that was a really insightful interaction with Bimal, filled with practical, actionable tips on coaching middle level managers. Middle managers, not level, I should say. Let me correct myself. I guess the role play was also very engaging, thanks to Johnny and Dr. Supriya. And thanks, Latha, for making this interaction rich with a lot of powerful questions. And last but not the least, the full wholehearted participation from all the coaches out here who brought out the essence of how we could take coaching middle managers to a next level through your questions and thoughts and ideas. So before we end the session, may I request everybody to come on camera so that we can take a photo of all of us together for our memories. Okay. I guess we have quite some screens open out here. So let me go one by one. Say cheese. Again. Thank you so much. And let me take this opportunity to also wholeheartedly invite all of you to visit the ICF India Coaching Awards. I guess it's a lot of pride for us that we are one of the first countries globally where we have been allowed to have these awards by ICF Global for celebrating and recognizing coaching excellence. So I request all of you to log into the website and wholeheartedly share it with all your fellow coaches and send in your nominations and your organization nominations for the same. There are 3 categories of awards for ACC, PCC, and MCC level coaches when it comes to the individual awards. And there is also one award for coaching cultures in organizations in terms of the Prism Awards, which is held globally. So this is like a golden opportunity for all of us as coaches to bring up our coaching excellence to the next level. So thank you everybody, and looking forward to interact with you more at ICF Pune Chapter webinars and meetings and other sessions moving forward. Thank you Latha, and thank you Bimal once again for this wonderful evening and this wonderful interaction.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice
Thank you.
evening and a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.